The Mongol Empire, an unparalleled military power stretching from Asia to Europe, stands among the mightiest empires in human history. Wherever the hooves of Mongol horses thundered, no grass would grow again. No fortress, however strong, could withstand their onslaught. Even the most formidable nations bowed in submission. They shattered the armies of vast empires, struck terror into the heart of Europe, and swept away entire civilizations in their dazzling prime. And yet, have you ever heard that this fearsome empire was defeated by a small nation in the south? Not once, but 3 times in succession. This is no legend. It is a truth recorded in the annals of history, the story of the 3 wars of resistance waged by the Tran Dynasty against the Yuan invaders, among the most glorious and monumental chapters in the history of the Vietnamese people. Throughout its long history, Dai Viet, literally Great Viet, the official name of Vietnam from 1054 to 1804, during the Lai, Tran, and later dynasties, has faced invaders far mightier in size and strength. But rarely has the challenge been as severe, or the scale as vast, as during the 3 wars against the Mongol Yuan Empire in the 13th century. The enemy was not merely a neighboring state, it was the Mongol Yuan Empire itself, the foremost military power of the medieval world, spanning Asia to Europe and subjugating nearly every civilization it encountered. Since 1206, when Temujin united the steppe tribes and proclaimed the Great Mongol State, Mongol armies had swept across Eurasia, annihilating or subjugating a succession of powerful realms: the Khwarezm Empire, the Rus Principalities, Hungary, Persia, advancing even to the frontiers of Europe. Under Kublai Khan, the empire became the Great Yuan, devouring the southern Song in 1279, a major East Asian power with an economy, population, and army many times greater than that of Dai Viet. By contrast, Dai Viet was but a small coastal nation in Southeast Asia, its territory, population, and resources dwarfed by its northern foe. Its army was largely composed of local levies, drawn from the villages under mandatory service, and the household troops of its princes. Weapons, equipment, and military technology were inferior to those of the Mongol Yuan forces, battle-hardened through countless continental campaigns, with elite steppe cavalry and capable southern fleets. The balance of power was thus utterly unequal. The Mongol Yuan army, tightly organized, disciplined with iron rigor, commanded by seasoned generals, and equipped with the most advanced siegecraft, cavalry tactics, and naval warfare techniques of the age, backed by immense human and material resources from a transcontinental empire. The Dai Viet army, far fewer in number, simply equipped, relying on rivers, forests, and mountains, and on the unity and mobility of its people. In such a context, the fact that Dai Viet defeated the Mongol Yuan forces 3 times in a row, in 1258, 1285, and 1287, 1288, was more than a mere military victory. It was a miracle in the history of world warfare, proof of the indomitable will for independence, the exceptional military genius of the Tran Dynasty, and the artful mastery of terrain, strategy, and diplomacy to overcome a far stronger foe. It was precisely this stark imbalance in strength before each clash that makes the victories of Dai Viet all the more magnificent in the chronicles of human history. The First War, 1258. Historical background. The question of why the Mongols launched their invasion of Dai Viet, literally Great Viet, in 1258 remains a matter of debate, with no single definitive answer. The complete annals of Dai Viet claims the Mongols came merely as raiding cavalry to plunder, but the reality was far more complex. Since 1206, when Temujin, later known as Genghis Khan, united the steppe tribes and proclaimed himself Chinggis Khan, the Mongol Empire had come to dominate vast stretches of Eurasia. Under Great Khan Munka, the Mongols waged relentless campaigns against the Southern Song dynasty, determined to annihilate it. His grand strategy was to strike from multiple directions simultaneously, and for this purpose he planned to establish an operational base in southwest China. In the summer of 1252, Munka sent his brother Kublai to lead an army into Sichuan against the Southern Song. By the following spring, the Mongols had won, and Kublai, on imperial orders, established a base there. The Mongols next sought to bring the kingdom of Dali, in present-day Yuan, into submission. When their envoys were rejected and killed, they struck in September 1253. By year's end, they had captured the capital, and in early 1254, General Uriankadai seized King Duan Xingji. All of Yunnan came under Mongol control. Thus, before turning toward Dai Viet, the Mongols had already spent years sweeping through the southern regions. To penetrate further into a land with unfavorable terrain and climate solely to plunder would have been illogical. According to the Yuan Shi, History of the Yuan Dynasty, the 1258 campaign aimed to make long-term arrangements. In other words, the Mongols sought to subdue Dai Viet to create a rear base for their primary objective, striking at the southern flank of the Song. A secondary goal was to compel the Tran Dynasty into vassalage. However, Dai Viet need not be fully subdued like Yunnan, nor placed under direct rule. It would be enough to turn it into a supplier of food and manpower for future campaigns. For governance, the Mongols could tolerate the continued existence of local rule, as they had done with Goryeo on the Korean peninsula. In short, the principal objective of the Mongols in 1258 was to secure the submission of the Tran Dynasty and establish a base from which to attack the Song's southern flank. Full annexation of Dai Viet was not yet on the table. Dai Viet before the war. By the late 12th century, the Lai dynasty had grown weak. In the early 13th century, the situation worsened, leading to power struggles among regional military lords. Ultimately, authority fell into the hands of the Tran clan through marital ties. In early 1226, the Lai dynasty came to an end when Queen Xiu Huang ceded the throne to her husband, Tran Shan, known as Tran Tai Tong, the first emperor of the Tran dynasty. Upon taking the throne, the Tran rulers enacted policies to stabilize the economy and restore the livelihoods of the people. Dai Viet gradually revived. By the time of the Mongol invasion, the Tran had ruled for over 30 years, presiding over a stable and secure government. The campaign unfolds. November 1257, Mongol scouts under General Uriankadai began probing the northern borders of Dai Viet, literally Great Viet. Their first move was to repeatedly send envoys demanding the Tran court's surrender and vassalage. The response was defiant. The envoys were imprisoned, an unmistakable declaration of resistance. Late 1257, the Mongol army advanced, its main force composed of nearly 10,000 Mongol cavalry and about 20,000 troops from the Kingdom of Dali, present-day Yunnan. The Battle of Bin Linguyen, January 1258, Uriankadai divided his forces into two wings, one commanded by himself, the other by Trech Trekdo. They advanced toward the Thao River in the Kinbak region. On the Dai Viet side, Emperor Tran Tai Tong personally led 6 regiments of the Imperial Guard, reinforced by provincial troops, to confront the invaders. The Tran battle formation deployed war elephants in the front line to shield the infantry and cavalry behind, while the Navy held positions along the Red River to ensure a safe retreat if needed. Sensing the situation, Uriankadai ordered the vanguard under Trech Trekdo to ford the river. Once across, they were to strike the Tran Navy to cut off retreat, while the Central Army would act as the anvil to absorb attacks, and the rear guard under Ahuat would deliver the hammer blow to break and capture the Tran Emperor. But as soon as Trech Trekdo crossed the river, he abandoned the plan and launched an immediate assault. Tran Tai Tong, in person, directed the battle, urging his men forward despite a hail of arrows. With the plan in disarray, Uriankadai was forced to commit the Central Army in support. The rear guard advanced, targeting the elephants with volleys of arrows aimed at their legs and eyes. Gradually, the Mongols regained the upper hand, driving the Dai Viet forces back. Faced with the risk of total defeat, General Latan urged the emperor to withdraw. Tran Tai Tong had no choice but to retreat, stationing at the low river with Latan covering the rear. The Mongols pursued, loosing volleys of arrows. Latan shielded the emperor by raising planks on boats to block the shafts. Thanks to the timely retreat, the Tran forces preserved their strength, falling back to Thien Mac, tactical withdrawal and counterattack. Though defeated at Bin Linguyen, the Tran army remained intact and in control of its movements. Tran Tong and Latan withdrew to Kuban, where they met General Pham Ku Trich, bringing reinforcements. The Mongols caught up, and in close combat they killed Pham Ku Trich, but failed to capture the emperor. The Tran forces safely reached Phula Wharf. Enraged at failing to take Tran Tong, Uryankadai blamed Trek Trekto for disobeying orders and ruining the plan. The latter was forced to commit suicide by poison. Returning to Tian Mac, the Tran emperor convened a war council. When he asked his brother, Grand Commander Tran Nhat Hyo, for a plan to save the country, Nhat Hyo said nothing but dipped his finger in water and wrote 2 words, Nap Tong, on the side of the boat, meaning flee to the song. When asked about the elite troops under his command, Nhat Hyo replied they could not be summoned. Tran Tong then turned to Grand Chancellor Tran Thu Do for counsel. The Chancellor declared, "As long as my head has not fallen, your Majesty should fear nothing else." The Battle of Pu Lo and the fall of Thang Long. The next day, the Tran destroyed the Pu Lo Bridge and arrayed forces along the riverbank. Lacking boats, the Mongols fired arrows into the water to gauge depth. Where the arrows sank, the water was shallow enough for cavalry to cross. Once across, the Mongols broke the Tran line. At Pu Lo, the Tran were defeated again, forcing the emperor and court to abandon Thang Long entirely. The Yuan records that after 2 defeats, the Tran emperor withdrew to Haidong, leaving the capital to fall. Contrary to popular belief, the scorched earth policy was not prepared in advance. Only after the defeat at Binlinguyen did the Tran hastily evacuate part of the population, provisions, and materials from the capital. According to the Yuan when the Mongols entered Thang Long, many inhabitants remained. Uryankadai found the imprisoned Mongol envoys, some already dead, and, in revenge, unleashed looting and massacres. Mongol supply problems. Although they captured Thang Long in just 2 battles, the Mongols found the treasury empty and food supplies dangerously low. Raids into the surrounding countryside yielded little. The army faced shortages and could not remain long. The Battle of Dongbo Dao, a turning point. On the night of January 28-29 from Tian Mac, Tran Tong and Crown Prince Tran Hoang led their forces upriver in a surprise attack on the Mongol camp at Dongbo Dao. Believing the Tran exhausted, the Mongols were complacent and unprepared. The sudden assault threw them into disarray, and they were routed, forced to abandon Thang Long and retreat to Yunnan. On their retreat in the mountains of Quy Hoa, the Mongols were ambushed again by local forces, worsening their plight. Fearing pursuit, they withdrew rapidly, refraining from further looting. The people of Dai Viet mockingly called them Buddha bandits. Reasons for the withdrawal. The Yuan claims the Mongols stayed 9 days and left due to the stifling climate. However, multiple sources confirm the Battle of Dongbo Dao. It is likely that Uryankadai realized holding Thang Long was impossible with dwindling troops and supplies, and chose to withdraw, leaving Dali troops to hold the position, who were then destroyed at Dongbo Dao. The climate was merely an excuse. End of the campaign and diplomatic outcome. After retreating to Yunnan, Uryankadai sent envoys again to demand Tran submission. Returning to a devastated Thang Long, Tran Tong angrily had the Mongol envoys bound and expelled. Later that year, he abdicated in favor of Crown Prince Tran Hoang, now Tran Tong, and assumed the title of retired emperor. Subsequently, the Tran court sent Latan as chief envoy, accompanied by Bak Lam, to the Mongols to seek peaceful relations. An agreement was reached. Dai Viet would send tribute once every 3 years. Nominally, Dai Viet became a vassal, but in reality it remained independent and free from direct control. A letter in 1275 from Yuan Emperor Kublai Khan to Tran Tong made it explicit. Apart from regular tribute, Dai Viet was exempt from all 6 obligations of a dependent state, such as personal attendance at court, sending royal hostages, census registration, tax payment, military assistance, and the stationing of Mongol officials. Measured against the Mongols' original goal, to turn Dai Viet into a dependent state and a springboard for attacks on the Song, they achieved only half. Dai Viet submitted in name, but in substance retained its independence. Thus, the First War of 1258 though not vast in scale, was the Mongol Empire's first test in Dai Viet. They were forced to accept a half-measure result, while the Tran Dynasty preserved sovereignty, albeit at a cost in manpower and resources. The Second War, 1285. Diplomatic tensions before the war. The Second War between Dai Viet and the Mongol Yuan Empire erupted in 1285, yet the seeds of conflict had smoldered since the First War of 1258. In 1259, Great Khan Mongke died while campaigning against the Southern Song. A succession struggle broke out between Kublai and Arik Bokeh, ending in 1260 with Kublai's ascension to the throne. In 1271, he renamed the realm from the Great Mongol State to the Yuan Dynasty. By 1279, the Yuan had utterly destroyed the Southern Song. From the perspective of Dai Viet, a Confucian state steeped in Chinese cultural traditions, the Yuan, though masters of the Central Plain, were still viewed as barbarians who had extinguished the civilized order. For the Tran court, the coming struggle was not merely one for political independence, but a cultural confrontation, a refined Dai Viet against the steppe tribes, the Yuan's demands. In 1261, Kublai dispatched two envoys, Meng Jia and Li Wentuan, bearing letters to Dai Viet. After receiving them with courtesy, King Tran Thantong sent his own envoys in return. Kublai invested the Tran ruler as king of Annam, granted precious gifts, and set a schedule of tribute every 3 years. He also appointed Naptik Din as Daragachi, the imperial supervisor stationed in Thonglong, to oversee Dai Viet's administration. From 1262 to 1268, the Daragachi was rarely present in the capital, and some records suggest the Tran court bribed him to conceal internal affairs. In 1267, the Mongols issued new, harsher demands. Both King Tran Thantong and retired Emperor Tran Taitong were to personally come to the Yuan court, while sending a royal prince as hostage. They also required a nationwide census, taxation, and the delivery of valuable tribute. By the year's end, Kublai appointed his ninth son, Prince Togon, as king of Yunnan, granting him authority over Yunnan in Dai Viet, the Tran Dynasty incident and the collapse of relations. In 1278, retired Emperor Tran Taitong passed away. King Tran Thantong abdicated in favor of Crown Prince Tran Kam, now Tran Nahan Tong, while continuing to co-rule as retired emperor. Seizing the moment, Kublai sent an embassy led by Sankodar, demanding that the Tran ruler attend court. According to the Yuan Shi, Kublai's letter carried a thinly veiled threat. You have been a subject state for over 20 years, yet you have failed to fulfill the 6 duties. If you will not come to court, then ready your fortresses and troops to meet my army. Tran Nantong refused, citing his inability to endure the northern climate, and sent envoys Trin Din Toan and Dokuok in his stead. Trin Din Toan was detained. In 1281, the Yuan again demanded the Tran king's attendance. Claiming illness, he sent his uncle Tran Dynasty instead. Kublai invested Tran Dynasty as king of Annam, appointing Tiamo Ni as governor, and dispatched 1,000 troops to escort him home. The two Tran rulers rejected this puppet installation. They ambushed the escort, captured Tran Dynasty, and punished him. This act shattered relations. Sankodar's arrogance during his embassy further inflamed tensions, and war became inevitable. The Yuan campaign against Champa and the designs on Dai Viet. In late 1282, the Yuan commander Sogetu was ordered to lead a naval expedition against Champa. The Cham, outmatched, retreated into the mountains, where Sogetu could not dislodge them. The Tran court sent warships to aid Champa. In 1283, Arigaya was sent to Dai Viet to request passage for an invasion of Champa, along with the use of Dai Viet as a supply base. The Tran refused. The following year, Kublai appointed Prince Togon as Prince Protector of the South to lead an invasion from the north, while Sogetu struck from the south. Refused again, the Yuan began immediate preparations for war. Forces and strategic intentions. In autumn 1284, Prince Togon arrived at the frontier under the pretext of campaigning against Champa, but in reality to invade Dai Viet. By early 1285, Sogetu openly declared his aim to seize Jiaoji, establish bases at Viet Li, Chaozhou, and Tilang for supplies, and avoid risky sea transport. The complete annals of Dai Viet claims that Prince Togon commanded 500,000 troops with another 500,000 under Sogetu, figures clearly exaggerated for intimidation purposes. According to the Yuan Shui, Prince Togon had 80,000 household troops, 2 Mongols, 6 Han per household. Sogetu commanded 10,000, 20,000 from Champa, and a third force came from Yunnan. Based on Yuan military structure, each Wanhu roughly 3,000, 10,000 men, the actual total was likely under 100,000. The Tran, though far fewer in population, permitted royal princes to raise their own armies, creating a sizable force of imperial guards, provincial troops, and household retainers. Both the complete annals of Dai Viet and the abridged records of Annam suggest the Tran fielded over 100,000 troops. The 1285 campaign. Late January 1285, 3 Yuan armies advanced simultaneously. Main force, Prince Togon and Arik Kaya, with naval support from Omar. From Yunnan, Nasir al-Din. From Champa, Sogetu, marching north. Prince Togon's vanguard entered via Kawan and Kaplin, followed by the main body. The Tran deployed forces at key passes. The first clash at Hai Khao, Sundong, saw the Yuan defeat the Tran under Dovi and Duhu. The Yuan broke through Dongban Pass, killing Tran Sam. Within days, Prince Togon's host breached Vien Chao, Thiet Loc, and Chilang. In early February, the Yuan split into 6 columns to assault Noibang Pass, defended by Grand Prince Hung Dao Tran Quoc Tuan. The Tran suffered heavy losses, General Doan Tai was captured, and withdrew to Van Keep. The battles of Van Keep, Pha Lai, Chilin. At Van Keep, seeing a major Tran force concentrated, Prince Togon prepared to cut off their retreat by water. On February 11th, Omar's fleet struck Van Keep, Pha Lai, and Chilin. The fighting was fierce. The Tran killed Yuan General Wu Shun, but ultimately withdrew to avoid being encircled. On February 14th, Omar besieged Tran Quoc Tuan's army. Both Tran kings came in person to relieve him, but were forced to abandon Van Keep, Pha Lai, and Bin Than, retreating to a defensive line along the Red River outside Thang Long. The Red River standoff and the abandonment of the capital. On February 17th, the Yuan built camps on the Red River, preparing to cross by boat and pontoon. The Tran fortified the opposite bank to delay the crossing and evacuate the royal family. That afternoon, the Tran sent Dokuk Chung to feign peace talks. Arik Kaya refused. A furious battle followed. The Tran withdrew downriver, leaving Thang Long empty. The Yuan occupied the deserted palace, feasted for a day, then withdrew to the north bank to await Sogetu's arrival. Prince Togon sent Kutanjir Mankudai and Bolad Kapchi to pursue the retreating Tran army, while Omar and Li Heng chased by water. Rearguard actions. Nasir al-Din's Yunnan army clashed with Prince Chiu Van Tran Nhat Duat, who withdrew to avoid isolation. The Yuan tried to encircle the Tran by sending blocking forces ahead. Tran Nhat Duat, discovering the plan, abandoned his boats, marched overland, and rejoined the Tran kings, then was dispatched to intercept Sogetu. The kings decided to withdraw to Tien Truong, pursued constantly by the Yuan. Da Mak, Marquis Bao Ngia, Tran Bin Trong held the Sacred Wing Army against overwhelming odds. Captured, he was offered a northern princely title. He replied, "I would rather be a ghost of the south than a king of the north." He was executed at age 26. Hai Ti, the Tran tried to block the river with stakes and embankments, but were defeated and fell back to regroup at Tien Truong Yen. Counteroffensive and turning the tide. Seeing the Yuan abandon Van Keep, Tran Quoc Tuan returned with the navy. His retainer Nguyen Loc launched fierce guerrilla raids at Vinh Bin. Arik Kaya reported to Kublai that the Tran king was gathering 1,000 warships at Van Keep. Once ready, the Tran counterattacked. On March 10th, they sailed up the Red River to engage the Yuan, but were forced to retreat. Meanwhile, Sogetu advanced from Tan Hoa after defeating Tran Nhat Duat and Tran Quang Kai. The defection of Tran Kien, leading 10,000 men, allowed the Yuan to surprise and kill Tran generals Din Sha, and Nguyen Tat Thong. Strategic crisis and the royal withdrawal. With the southern front broken, the Tran army at Thien Truong Yen was threatened from two sides. The Tran offered peace and sent Princess An Tu to Prince Togon to delay him. Tran Quoc Tuan sailed from Van Keep to rescue the court. The king slipped away in small boats via Giao Hai estuary, looping north and down to Tam Trinh Nguyen, Quang Ninh, while sending the royal barge to Ngoc Son, Mong Chai, as a decoy. Yuan difficulties. Sogatu's forces in Thanh Hoa suffered from shortages and the unfamiliar climate. Omar and Li Heng failed to capture the Tran kings. Several Tran nobles defected, most notably Tran Ishtak, the highest-ranking defector. Prince Togon's army in the north also suffered hunger, disease, and the oppressive summer heat. Sogatu marched north to join him. The battles of Ham Tu, Tay Ket, Chuang Dong. Ham Tu, commanded by Tranat Duat, Marquis Hoai, Van Tran Quoc Toan, Nguyen Koai, and exiled Song general Zhao Zhong. The weary Yuan mistook the Song exiles for a Song restoration force, panicked, and were defeated. Sogatu fled. Chuang Dong, Tai Ket, Tran Quang Kai, Pham Ngu Lao, Tran Quoc Toan, and Nguyen Koai struck the Yuan fleet at Chuang Dong, burning many ships. On June 24th, the Tran kings led the attack at Tai Ket, killing Sogatu and capturing Zhangxian. Omar abandoned his ships and escaped on foot. Outcome and significance. In the wake of successive victories, the Tran retook Thang Long. The remaining Yuan outside the city, weakened by disease and hunger, were driven north across the Red River by Tran Quoc Tuan and Prince Hung Ninh Tran Tung. The Tran pursued to the Nhu Nguyet River, the Sash River, and Van Keep. Yuan General Li Heng was killed by a poison arrow. Prince Togon escaped by hiding inside a copper tube. The war ended in complete Tran victory. Though the early phase was marked by defeat, the Tran court endured, exploiting terrain and climate, and striking back with decisive counteroffensives to achieve a historic triumph. The Third War, 1287-1288. Background and the Yuan's new invasion plan. Despite the crushing defeat of 1285, Kublai Khan's ambition to conquer Dai Viet remained unbroken. As early as August 1286, the Yuan Privy Council proposed a renewed campaign. By mid-February 1287, Kublai ordered Arik Kaya to present an invasion plan. By early March, the commanders were chosen. This time, to resolve the logistical failures that had doomed them before, the Yuan prepared a massive naval fleet dedicated to transporting supplies. The overall commander was once again the Prince Protector of the South, Prince Togon. The generals included Al-Kushir, Omar, Fan Yi, Yeke Kasar, Shiba Ali Gushun, many of whom had fought in the 1285 campaign and were familiar with Dai Viet's terrain. On June 18, 1286, Deputy Commander Arik Kaya died. Aokushir was promoted in his place. According to the Yuan Shui, the Yuan mobilized 70,000 Mongol and Han troops from Jiangxi, Jianghuai, and Huguang provinces, 6,000 from Yunnan, 1,000 former Song soldiers, 15,000 Li troops from Hainan, forces from Guangxi, and remnants from 1285, totaling over 100,000 men. Within this, the fleet of Omar and Fan Yi comprised 18,000 sailors, 700 newly built warships, 120 vessels from Hainan, and about 70 transport ships carrying 170,000 shy of grain under Zhang Wenhu. Force deployment. On the Dai Viet side, though only 2 years had passed since the last war, King Tran Nantong was able to mobilize a large force, proclaiming a general amnesty to encourage enlistment. Experience from 1285 ensured the Tran would not be caught off guard. Supreme command rested with Grand Prince Hung Dao Tran Quoc Tuan and Prince Chiao Min Tran Quang Kai. Notably, Prince Tran Khan Du was tasked with defending Van Don to block the Yuan Navy, while General Lei Tan guarded Tan Huang'an. Phase 1, the Yuan advance. In November 1287, the Yuan invaded under the pretext of escorting King of Annam Tranich Tak back to his country. They split into several forces, Yunnan column under Aju, advancing via the Thao and Low rivers. Main force under Prince Togon, marching from Qinzhou and Lianzhou into northeastern Dai, accompanied by Tran Dynasty. Naval force under Omar and Fan Yi, protecting Zhang Wenhu's supply fleet. At Lok Chau, Prince Togon split his army, 10,000 under Trin Bangfi and Balad Kapchi as vanguard. 2,500 left to guard the arsenal at Tuming. The vanguard ravaged the border, winning 17 consecutive victories, according to the Yuan Shi. The Yunnan troops clashed with Prince Chiovantran Natduat at Bak Hak, killing generals Lathash and Ha'an, and seizing many boats. Omar and Fan Yi detached from the supply fleet to attack Trangia at Damo. The Tran initially captured a few ships but were forced to retreat before superior numbers. Omar abandons the supply fleet, Tran Khandu's opportunity. After driving back the Tran, Omar, overconfident, left Zhang Wenhu's transports unguarded to join Prince Togon inland. Prince Togon, hearing of delayed supplies, sent troops to seize food locally. The Tran, unable to match the Yuan in strength, withdrew to Van Keep. In January 1288, Omar and Fan Yi joined Prince Togon at Van Keep, where he encamped at Palai Chilin. While advancing toward Thanglong, 5,000 Yuan escorting Tran Duke, son of Tran Ishtak, were ambushed by Nguyen the Lock at Noibang, suffering heavy losses. Occupation of Thanglong, the Tran's feint. By Lunar New Year 1288, Aju's Yunnan column joined Prince Togon on the Red River. On February 2nd, the Yuan assaulted Thanglong. Grand Prince Hung Dao Tran, Quoc Tuan, defended fiercely, shooting from within the walls. Multiple Yuan assaults failed. At night, Tran raiding parties burned supplies before slipping away. After holding the enemy long enough, Tran Quoc Tuan escorted both kings down the Red River, through Jiao Tui estuary to the sea, then looped north to Thap Son. Omar pursued, but upon hearing that Leitan was holding Than Hoa, turned back, destroying the tomb of King Tran Tai Tong at Long Hung along the way. Tran Khandu destroys a supply fleet. According to the Yuan Shi, the Yuan claimed continuous victories and the destruction of many Tran positions, most being decoys. Prince Nan Hui Tran Khandu, after letting Omar and Fan Yi slip past Vandon, was reprimanded by retired Emperor Tran Than Tong. He begged for a few days to redeem himself. In early 1288, Zhang Wenhu's supply convoy entered Vandon, only to be ambushed by Tran Khandu. Without the main fleet's protection, the Yuan were routed. Zhang Wenhu fled, dumping all grain into the sea to keep it from the Tran. Other convoys also met disaster. Some wrecked in storms, others drifted to Champa or Guangdong. The Yuan's entire logistics network collapsed. Logistical collapse and Prince Togon's stalemate. With no supplies, the Yuan strategy unraveled. Prince Togon in Thanglong waited in vain, sending Omar to fetch grain. On February 10th, Omar was ambushed at Vanak estuary, taking heavy losses. Zhang Wenhu's fate was unknown. The Yuan seized a small amount of rice locally, far from enough to feed the army. Hunger, disease, and collapsing morale set in. The Tran tightened control over Haiduong Hai Fong, threatening to cut the route back to Van Keep. By late March 1288, Prince Togon abandoned Thanglong, retreating to Van Keep after only 4 months in the field. The decisive Battle of Bak Dang. Prince Togon resolved to retreat to Yuan territory. The land army under his direct command. The naval force under Omar and Fan Yi. The Tran planned to annihilate the Yuan fleet on the Bak Dang River. On April 9, 1288, the Yuan fleet entered the river mouth, striking submerged stakes as the tide ebbed. Tran forces from both banks surged forth, fire ships crashing into enemy warships. Fan Yi tried to seize Trangken Mountain, but was thrown back. The Yuan ships jammed together, many stuck on stakes, others blocked downstream. The entire Yuan fleet was destroyed or captured. General Zhang Yu perished. Omar and Fan Yi were taken alive. Prince Togon's escape. On April 8th, Prince Togon's land army reached Langson. Crossing Noibang Pass, they were ambushed by the Tran, forcing a diversion to Lok Chau. Pursued and harried, the Yuan suffered heavy losses. A Kushir was killed by a poisoned arrow. Not until May 9th did Prince Togon finally cross the border to Tuming. End of the war and aftermath. The third invasion ended in swift, devastating defeat for the Yuan. Captured generals were released, though Vietnamese sources claim Omar was secretly executed for atrocities against civilians and desecrating the royal tomb, something the Yuan could not publicly address. For Dai Viet, after 3 wars, 1258, 1285, 1287, 1288, the nation had suffered greatly yet preserved its independence. Relations with the Yuan returned to a tense peace, tributes sent periodically but with no imperial oversight. The 3 wars of resistance against the Mongol Yuan invasions, 1258, 1285, 1287, 1288, under the Tran Dynasty stand as one of the most glorious chapters in the history of Dai Viet, and at the same time, a rare feat in the entire history of world warfare. The enemy was a mighty empire stretching from Asia to Europe, with military power virtually unmatched, an empire that had subdued or annihilated nations many times larger than Dai Viet. Yet under the wise leadership of the royal court, the brilliant strategic genius of commanders such as Grand Prince Hung Dao, Vuong Tran Quoc Tuan, and the unwavering unity of the entire people, those invading armies, once thought invincible, were shattered time and again. These victories not only preserved independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, but also affirmed Dai Viet's position on the regional political map, sending shockwaves across the contemporary world. The 3 wars left behind invaluable lessons, knowing how to exploit the advantages of terrain, skillfully combining conventional warfare with guerrilla tactics, balancing military might with diplomatic maneuvering, and above all, mobilizing the united strength of the entire nation. From the rice fields, riverbanks, and mountain forests of the 13th century, the resounding war drums, the oath of Sat That, kill the Tatars, and the unyielding spirit of the Tran soldiers and people still echo to this very day. The 3 resistances against the Mongol Yuan shall forever remain an immortal symbol of patriotism, steadfast will, and the yearning for freedom of the Vietnamese people, a small nation that has never bowed before any invading force.